Hi, my name's Alex Witney, this is Conspiracy 101, and today we're going to look at the top 10 Ripley's Believe It or Not facts. Now, there are a lot of qualifiers for this. The main reason I'm doing this is because my daughter got from the library this book, and I liked it so much that she didn't really read it. I read it all, and then I bought a copy. It's a really weird book. It's more of a travel journal than a Ripley's Believe It or Not book. And as such, my top 10 is mainly from this, with a few qualifiers, which we'll get into as we go through the list. And because it's a travel journal, most of the facts that we're going to go through are kind of outside of the US and Europe. The majority are in places like Asia and Africa. Again, apart from a few exceptions. Before I get into the top 10, I would like to go over some runners-up. They didn't quite make the top 10, but not necessarily because I didn't put them in the top 10. A lot of the ones that are in the top 10 were outsiders. I just couldn't find any information other than what's in this book. Now, this book mainly deals with Ripley's own adventures, and it's very nice. It has, pretty pictures. Oh wow, look at that pop up and stuff, and there's lots of writings from him at the time. There are a couple that I was going to put in. There's one, a bridge in the Caucasus called the Blood Bridge, where the concrete is supposedly made from the blood of slaves, or the people who built it. And as such, the concrete is like tarnished red. I could find a red bridge, but nothing about blood on the internet. There was another one, a Congo, somewhere in the Congo. Again, that's a big region. The chiefs, their burial rites were to be blown up, not exploded, but blown up like a balloon. Again, this is in the book, but I couldn't find anything online about that. There was another one about people being left inside, like a living funeral, left inside a tree, and the tree spouting from them. Again, couldn't find anything online. If you know what those specific things are called, please let me know in the comments, and maybe I'll make another list and include those. But, as it is, here are my personal top 10 Ripley's facts. So let's just get straight into it with number 10. The man who won a horse race, dead. Now, like I said, a few exceptions. The majority of these aren't actually from the Ripley's website. They don't have much info about the stuff that's in here, which makes me think it was kind of made up. But the whole point of Ripley's Believe It or Not was that it was real, it was true, it was kind of genuine. So, I don't know. This is one of the examples of finding something outside of the book. Just to fluff it up a little bit, I found this one really interesting and weird. The Dead Horseman. So, Mr. Frank Hayes, winning usually comes with a lot of pomp and circumstance, but not so much for Frank Hayes, who has won a horse race despite being dead. In 1923, the 35-year-old jockey was competing in a steeplechase at New York's Belmont Park. A horse trainer and longtime stableman, Hayes had never won a race before, and no one expected him to take the first spot that day while riding a 20-to-1 outsider named Sweet Kiss, a horse owned by Miss A.M. Frayling. The odds didn't seem to bother Hayes. What did seem to bother him was his heart. Sometime during the race, the Hayes suffered a heart attack and died instantly. However, he didn't fall off his horse. In fact, he remained in the saddle for the rest of the race and actually crossed the finish line first, winning by a head. Despite the fact that he had died at some point whilst still on the track, no one was aware of anything had gone wrong until Miss Frayling and the officials went to congratulate Hayes, only to find out he was no longer alive. And this is what it's been, what Ripley's is famous for, the cartoons and the illustrations, which we will see many of. Sweet Kiss of Death. While the unfortunate incident could have been caused by a number of conditions, various theories floated around regarding the reason of the jockey's heart attack. Conspiracy theories, maybe? One which figured that the mere excitement of the race may have been too much, suggested that riders' recent weight loss, dropping to 142 pounds, from 142 pounds to 130 pounds in a very short time, in order to qualify for the race. That will impact your heart. Jockeys are very, very slim. Despite being the winner of the horse, Hayes rode, never raced again, and Sweet Kiss was nicknamed Sweet Kiss of Death for the rest of her life. And that's from one of these undeniable, true, believe it or not books. Number 9 is Cadaver Synod. Synod. The trial of the Pope Formosus's corpse. They put a corpse on trial. Again, this is not one from the book. This is very European, but it's very fitting with this Search for the Shrunken Heads and Other Curiosities book. Believe it or not, the Catholic Church was once so upset with one of its popes that they dug up its corpse, put him on trial. The case against the late Pope Formosus became known as the Cadaver Synod. There he is, looking very cool. There he is, looking very dead. I'm not going to read this, but you can go read about it. Very interesting. Why did they not like him? What was the reason? They excommunicated him. He was just disgraced. What does that even mean? Complete redaction of previous Pope's edicts, strategies. Yeah, that's fair enough, but why would you... Unfortunately, the plan failed. Formosus died some years later. Despite his death, the many enemies he had made in life sought retribution. The year after his death in 896, Pope Stephen VI had Formosus's body pulled out of the ground, dressed in papal vestments, and placed on the throne to stand trial. A deacon was provided to answer for the lifeless Formosus, but no one really defended him. He was declared unworthy to have ever been pope, and his reign and decrees were all stricken. Furthermore, they cut off his fingers of consecration and tossed his body into the Tiber River. His body was retrieved by monks, but it wasn't until the death of Stephen VI that Formosus' body would be reinterred, so reburied, at St. Peter's Basilica, or entombed, I guess. Trials against the dead were banned for a time, but Pope Sergius III reinstated the actions against Formosus, and a back and forth of these actions took place sometime before the body was exhumed again, retried, and beheaded. Today, the Catholic Church supports none of these findings, disregarding them as political. I wonder why. Okay, so finally getting to one that's actually in the book. Those two, again, were ones that I pulled from the Ripley's website, which I thought were interesting and keeping with the book, but not necessarily from the book. Ancient Greeks left their mark in Egypt in 591 BC in graffiti. So graffiti is not a modern thing. It is very, very old. Graffiti is usually viewed nowadays as a modern scourge, a blight on buildings and highway overpasses in our cities that should be eradicated. However, the urge to leave your mark for posterity is nothing new, as ancient Greek graffiti carved into the temple of Abu Simbel in Egypt clearly shows. Right, let's actually get to it. Look at that. That's crazy. Oh no, that's 1875. That's an old one. Okay, so that's not... I'm about to say, that's very impressive for something that's 1500... Hang on, was it BC? It was BC, 2,500 years old. The Egyptian soldiers were led by an officer named Amos, the Greeks called Amasis. Okay, so a large amount of interaction. Beginning in 600 BC, a new era dawned, in which much closer ties developed between the two Mediterranean powers. So, lots of people going back and forth. More importantly, there were diplomatic gifts bestowed by Egyptian pharaohs. And more Greek graffiti. Where is it? Yeah, you can see it. Isn't that mad? Does it actually say what it says? Did I just, like, skip past that completely? Clear ancient graffiti referring to a military campaign fought by... Okay. Many of the Greeks of the time were clearly literate. Oh, I thought I said illiterate. That's a shame. Even including soldiers of fortune. So it's just names, isn't it, and dates. That's so strange. Anyway, I thought that was really interesting. In at number 7, this is a weird one. 2 pupils. And this one I could find a lot of information about, including this article. So, Pupula Duplex, real or myth? So it's said to be a rare condition in a person who has 2 irises and 2 pupils in one eye. But is this condition real or a myth? The phrase Pupula Duplex can be tracked back to Ovid, and other ancient writers who refer to it as the evil eye. The meaning of Pupula Duplex, from Latin meaning double pupil, was debated in writings around the turn of the 20th century in attempts to determine if this evil eye was an actual condition or merely symbolism used by ancient writers. Blah, 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 blah. Smith concluded that pupilless could have meant double pupil, but it also could have meant Or it could have been interpreted to mean heterochromia, which is where you have two different colours in your eyes. Or two different colours. Yeah, has eyes of multiple colours. So you can have two different colours in one eye, like the outer ring and the inner ring. But yeah, it could be symbology. You could just say, like, someone's... modern times would say they're two-faced. Maybe it was just back in the day they'd say, oh, you're two-eyed, aren't you? Practically non-existent model medical literature, so we've never seen it. Polychoria could roughly resemble two irises in certain cases. I have seen that, but there's no picture, which is a shame. Irises give the illusion of two irises. Ripley's, here we go. Liu Chung, this is the one who's in the book, is the man often cited as an example of a person with Pupula Duplex. A wax statue of Liu Chung still exists in Ripley's museum, such as the locations in London. The statue contains the following caption. The double-eyed man. Believe it or not, Liu Chung was born with double pupils in each eye. Despite his abnormality, he became governor of Shaanxi, China, and minister of the state in 995 AD. Later, through an affair with the Dowager Empress, he had his son proclaimed heir apparent of all China. Although Liu Chung's condition is extremely rare, other four-eyed men have been recorded by medical science. In 1931, Robert Ripley personally met a double-eyed man named Henry Horn living in Mills, Kentucky. Why didn't he take any pictures? Double eyes, four eyes is merely artist concept, possibly inaccurate. In addition to the lack of medical evidence supporting Pupula Duplex, there is also a lack of photo evidence of the alleged condition. So Wikipedia page briefly maintained that it was real, which is really interesting. So someone obviously thought it was real. So basically, could be real, could be made up. In at number 6 is probably one of the ones that I could do an entire episode of Conspiracy 101 about. And they're Olmec Heads. These are giant heads that were found in Mesoamerica, so South America, Middle America. Really, really big, very odd looking, and, pre-Mayan, pre-Aztec. And because they're so odd looking, because they're so weird, there's a lot of conspiracies about them. The dating is really hard because it's rock. They're huge, they're proper megaliths. So the idea of being able to move them is really, difficult. How they made them, what they made them from, etc., etc. Does this look at all? Here you go. Here's where it is. So just south of the Gulf of Mexico, in Central America, and I just think they're awesome. They look amazing. Does this have conspiracies about vandalism? Who would vandal them? Oh, there's stuff about steelies in different places, and it has replicas, which is awesome. But it doesn't talk about conspiracy. I'm gonna control F it. Hey, there we go. Oh, it's literally at the bottom. I just wasn't looking. Online conspiracy theory memes have surfaced claiming it is proof of Africans arriving in the Americas before Columbus. I wouldn't say they were memes. There's people pushing that seriously. I have done episodes on Graham Hancock, and he's said it multiple times in his various TV shows and books. He thinks these look like African Americans, so black people. And it's proof that they came across. But I'm not so sure about that. But the fact there's a conspiracy around it is really cool. And I just like when ancient humans made massive things like this and then moved them about. It's just cool, isn't it? It's just cool. In at number 5, you heard it here first. Unicorns are real. Apart from they're not horses, they're humans. Human unicorns. While the search for a mythical horned horse of legend continues, Robert Ripley found his first human unicorn in 1930, which I think is this guy. This is the person who was in the book. Ripley discovered a photograph of Manchurian farmer. Manchuria is northern China, near Korea. Only known as Wang. A massive 13-inch horn was growing straight out of the back of Wang's head, and he was the first of the human unicorns found by Ripley. Ripley travelled to China in the following years, but never managed to meet Wang in person. The evidence for this seemingly mythical man was confirmed not just by the photo and hearsay, however, but by a handful of other unicorns Ripley encountered in his travels and research. Among many of the confirmed cases of humans growing horns, an old woman in France had her horn cut off and presented to the King of France in 1696. Lovely. That's a great... That's a gift, you know, for any celebration, isn't it? You know, Christmas, perfect. Birthday, perfect. Another French woman, something in the water, Madame Dimanche, grew a 9.8 inch. It's all about the inches, isn't it? You know, everyone's horn is special in its own way. Over the course of 6 years, she had the horn sprouting from her wrist at 8. Is it a horn if it's coming from your wrist? At age 82, her horn was successfully removed by a surgeon. Cause for human horns. Clinically labelled cutaneous horns. Some can be... That doesn't look real, does it? You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't look real. That looks real. That doesn't quite look real. Anyway, some can be merely superficial, while others can be product of malignant cancer cells. Roughly 20% of recorded cases have been determined to be malignant and are typically sensitive, unlike non-malignant cases. These growths are composed of protein called keratin, so it's just your nails, isn't it, and hair. Growing extensively as a tumour, the body cells began rapidly producing keratin and expelling it into horn-like structures. Keratin is not only the same protein that makes up human fingernails and hair, but also it makes up most animal horns. Really? Why? Due to the rarity of the disease, this hasn't been well studied, and the cause is still undetermined. Radiation exposure and viruses in the HPV family have both been suggested as likely culprits. Removal is simple, so simply cut the horn off. Many horns, however, grow back if not treated with radiation or chemotherapy. I'm not going to read about the guy with a thick skull. Weird. In at number 4 is another one I couldn't really find much information about other than in this book, and a copy of, I guess, is the original Ripley's Believe It or Not comic that appeared in newspapers about it. I saw, so it's in first person Ripley, a Sadhu, a Hindu ascetic, so someone who does something for the purpose of doing it in order to like appear holy. Hindus do it, and there's lots of different variations of them. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it, because although this one's really weird and cool, there are lots of variations I'm sure you've heard of. One, you know, hand in the air, leg behind the head, someone who's, you know, upside down for ages. They do it as a show of how seriously they take their religion. Not, you know, vows of silence, you know, monks going off into the wilderness. It's all over the place, but the Hindus take it very seriously and you know, to extremes in some cases. Held his hand closed for 12 years. Fair enough. It's pretty cool. But until the nails grew through his palms. Just think about that. Like, how would that work? In my mind, I'm guessing he wrapped it, because otherwise, it would just move as your nails grew, wouldn't it? I don't know. In at number 3 is the main focus of the book that we're talking about, and that is Shrunken Heads. But more specifically, as you can see in those pictures in the corner, shrunken bodies. Now, shrunken heads are a bit weird. If you go on the Ripley's website, you can see this really cool 3D image, and you can move them around and have a look at them. But there are lots of different websites talking about shrunken heads, and the majority of them were made for tourists, weren't they? They were faked. They were made from different animals, shaped to look like humans. But the tradition is real. It's just whether or not these are actually, you know, people, which is unlikely. So there's a Chinese person, various other people. So yeah, South America is famous for it, but they do it in lots of different places as well. This one's real, apparently, but not a ceremonial head. How can you tell if you have the real deal or just a fake? There are different types of shrunken heads. Sanas, false heads, and non-ceremonial human heads. Sanas are authentic Juvaro produced ceremonial human shrunken heads. They have narrow face, very dark skin, and almost vertical nostrils. Okay. Real ones made for tourist trade. Oh yeah, souvenir shrunken heads were made with an effort to retain realistic proportions. false heads, just non-real imitations. See, I just don't think there'll be that many real ones. Sloth, like the tofu of Shrunken Heads. Much like tofu is used as a poor substitute for meat, sloths are often used for head tofu sorts. Let me explain. Okay, so we use tofus instead. It's well known fact that Nazis committed unspeakable atrocities on their captives during the Holocaust in World War II, including medical and inhuman experiments. We've talked about that quite a few times on Conspiracy 101. The lesser known is recovered with other medical artifacts from concentration camps, including 2 human shrunken heads. That is mental. One of the heads was later used as evidence, in Nuremberg trials. Wow. But we have a crude replica of the one that is used in the trial. Good. But it's not the actual authentic one. Very, very spooky. So, there is another website that I've got. 8 disturbing facts about real shrunken heads. Okay. What were the shrunken heads used for? That's not a fact. That's a question. Which countries and... Okay. Severed human heads used for tribal cultures in a myriad of ways. There we go. Which cultures did it? Throughout the Pacific and northwestern Amazonian regions of South America. Are shrunken heads real human heads? Yes, they are real human remains. Okay. How were shrunken heads made? This is more interesting. After a successful hunt, the priests begin the shrinking process. Okay, that's pretty grim, isn't it, when you think about it? Shrunken heads rituals often associated with war, superstitions behind getting rid of your enemy. Headhunters. Headhunting's been a thing, North America has the scalps. Headhunting has been a thing for a long time. Is it Vlad the Impaler? Stuck their heads on the pikes. That's a part of war, unfortunately, isn't it? So they remove the skin and the hair, and then they stitch it back up, don't they? These guided schools often be offered to anacondas, which were seen as spiritual guides. Huh. How long does it take to make a shrunken head? Doesn't take long at all. No, whip one up in 5 minutes. Give me the ingredients. Does a shrunken head practice still exist? It's not allowed. You're not allowed to do it in Ecuador or Peruvian governments in the 1930s, but doesn't seem to be any laws in Ecuador or Peru preventing shrinking heads outright. So you're not allowed to move them around, but you can do it if you don't move it. Can you still buy them? It was highly sought after commodities by Westerners, especially during the late 1800s and early 1900s when this book was written. The sale of them became illegal in the 30s. What are the heads, shrunken heads replicas made from? Sloths, pigs, cows, monkeys. It's just leather, isn't it? Interesting. It doesn't. None of these. I thought I found one that talked about these guys, but basically the older gentleman with the beautiful greying beard was apparently a conquistador, a Spanish man, who was caught by the indigenous populations of South America, and his entire body was shrunk. Probably not true, but still pretty awesome. Oh, I love a cryptid. Number 2, Merman. So, this is the Merman of Aden. Mermaids, usually, it's just a dugong, isn't it? That's what the modern tells. But, occasionally, people would make a mermaid. And this is one of them. The real, genuine mermaid, which lives on the seaweeds and is more than half like human being, is now exhibited. The wonder of the world and God's creation. 3 were captured on coming to the surface of the sea to breathe, which they do every 5 minutes. The male and the young one broke through the net and escaped. It was only with the greatest difficulty that the female was hauled on board after being harpooned. The old myth that the mermaid was a beautiful female with rosy cheeks and golden hair is now exploded. The mermaid, whose photo is on the reverse, which is this one, was captured near Haram Island at 3 a.m. In 1905 by the intrepid Captain John Kaku. She measures 9 feet in length. Oh, is this one of these ones? Oh, these are actually dugongs, aren't they? That's not 9 feet in length. That thing's tiny. This one little mermaid of Aden. So let's have a look. Here it is. Oh, Fiji mermaids. Is this a different one? That is a different one, but it's the same idea. In case you can't figure it out, someone's taken a monkey and stuck a fish on its bum. Famous sideshow impresario P.T. Barnum was the man most directly responsible for the birth and the rise of fame of the legendary Fiji mermaid. The hoax became reality when in 1842 Barnum manipulated the New York Herald and 2 other newspapers to publish exclusive articles about these elusive mermaids. The rest is history. So there you go, that's the one I'm talking about, which is different to this one. So that's interesting that they've got 2... Oh, so that one's replicating it. They didn't do a very good job, because that one's a bit weirder. It's nothing more than the torso of a monkey sewn to the back half of a large fish. In at number 1. The one that caught me most off guard. I am used to reading weird articles, especially for this show. I am used to hearing odd stories and seeing odd things. Cryptids, aliens, you know, all the different things. The true horrific nature of humanity and the conspiracies that actually turn out to be true. And then you see a man with a candle literally stuck into his skull. This is Lighthouse Man. Believe it or not, a tour guide of Chongqing, China, once guided American dignitaries through the streets of Chongqing by the light of a candle in his head. His scalp had been cut through, and an opening to hold the inserted candle had been made through the external plate of the skull. The candle was then held in place by melted wax. So it's trepanning, or trepanning, where you make a hole in your head. He's done it on the top, so he can put a candle in it. I don't know why he didn't think of maybe a chin strap. Maybe a chin strap, I don't know. I found the original, I don't think it's the original comic. I think it's like Ripley's used to make books of the comics, and I think it's from there. But this really shows what majority of this book feels like when you're reading it. And I love it, but also it's horrible. But I love it because it's sort of like a time capsule, which is really interesting. Brace yourself. Believe it or not, this is page 343. The Lighthouse Man. Bored a hole in his head and wears a lighted candle in it. The heathen Chinese is peculiar. Full stop. No, there's no explaining that, is there? The heathen Chinese. It's not even talking about him. But none more so than the Lighthouse Man of Chongqing, Sichuan province, China, who goes about the streets at night with a lighted red candle, 7 or 8 inches. It's always about the inches with these Americans, isn't it? It's always about that. It's all about the length. What about the girth? In length, stuck in the vertex of his skull. I hope you've enjoyed this very strange episode of Conspiracy 101. Maybe I'll come back and revisit a few. If you've got some Ripley's Believe It or Not stories, dare say facts, that you would like me to talk about or you want to share with the world, comment below. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.